I think I tailor my approach to the individual patient. So there's pretty clear evidence that stage one and stage two prolapses, meaning just beyond the hymen, do almost as well with traditional repair as they do with robotic repair. So I present that data to patients. But we also know that stage three and four prolapse are better served by a graft-augmented repair, like a robotic sacrocolpopexy. And so I usually use the stage of the prolapse. So I will identify to the patient, what their stage of prolapse is, where the anterior compartment is in terms of the bladder, the apex of the uterus or the vaginal vault, and the posterior compartment, the rectocele. And then depending on the stage of the prolapse, if it's a stage one or two prolapse, I will steer them towards that native tissue or robotic sacrocolpopexy. Now, my feeling is I'm examining them supine. I'm examining them maybe earlier in the day. And at the end of the day, when gravity kind of takes its toll, or you've been up on your feet, or you're a young woman who really is going to put a lot of toll on this, they may go for a sacrocolpopexy that may be more durable long term, right? So I present that option to them. And then for stage three or four prolapse, I really try to present the pros and cons of both. But my goal and sort of our shared goal in the talk or in our appointment is really to prevent that patient from returning to the OR for a second procedure. So in my opinion, a sacrocolpopexy really supports the anterior compartment because we're putting down a piece of very lightweight mesh on the front wall of the vagina and on the posterior compartment on the back wall of the vagina. So not only are you supporting the apex, but if done correctly, you're supporting that entire anterior compartment to prevent a recurrent cystocele. You're supporting the entire posterior compartment to prevent a recurrent rectocele, and you're supporting the apex. So usually my younger patients that are marathon runners or avid exercisers are going for a sacrocolpopexy. And I've been in practice for 26 years. And when I came out of training, the sacrocolpopexy was an open procedure. So we were naturally gearing our patients towards a vaginal procedure first. And if they failed, then a sacrocolpopexy, because it was a much more morbid procedure. The patients were in the hospital for 3 days. They really had significant activity restrictions and pain for almost 4 to 6 weeks. In my hands, the sacrocolpopexy is almost as short as a vaginal native tissue repair. And all of our patients go home same day. So the recovery is the same. And if you look at pain scores, my patients with the sacrocolpopexy actually have less pain than a vaginal native tissue repair. So I present all of this to our patients and then let them make an informed decision. I think, it's really important to understand the litigation behind the transvaginal meshes and the transvaginal mesh kits, right? And the reason why there were significantly increased exposures in dyspareunia or pain with intercourse with those kits. So, even when I present slings for stress incontinence, I get, as soon as I present the word mesh, I can kind of see the alarming sort of eye-opening of my patients, right? And I think they've heard so much negative sort of information about mesh in the media and in our academic journals. So I really present the difference. So laparoscopic sacrocolpopexy comes in a completely different plane. So I was part of the entire sort of transvaginal mesh development, exposure, education of physicians. And, you are making a slightly larger incision on the anterior vaginal wall or the posterior vaginal wall when you put a transvaginal mesh in. And that dissection needs to be full thickness. And there are various techniques to get you to that full thickness. But a lot of times I think providers were afraid of getting into the bladder or getting into the rectum. And instead of doing that full thickness dissection, they were putting it in sort of split thickness in the muscularis or the vaginal wall, right? And the dissection was not in the correct plane. So when you're coming in laparoscopically, you're in a completely different plane. So you're dissecting the bladder away from the front wall of the vagina, or dissecting the rectum away from the back wall of the vagina. So you have a full thickness vaginal wall on the anterior wall and the posterior wall. So the incidence of mesh exposure that I've seen in my own anecdotal practice is probably less than 0.2%. I mean, I do so many sacrocolpopexies, and I think it's also technique driven, right? So I think, coming down on the anterior vaginal wall and the posterior vaginal wall, I use very little cautery. So and then if I'm not in the correct plane, if I'm actually diving into the muscle of the vagina, you see significant bleeding. So if you're doing just cold cutting as you come down, I think you're actually not not decreasing the blood supply of the anterior vaginal wall and the posterior vaginal wall. So you're decreasing your incidence of mesh exposure and you're in the correct plane. So I think a lot of us do supracervical hysterectomies instead of total laparoscopic hysterectomies, because the issue with mesh was also putting mesh against a newly closed incision line. And so when you preserve a little bit of the cervix with a supracervical hysterectomy, it gives you a buffer. And there's actually pretty well published data that shows that the incidence of mesh exposure, if you preserve the cervix, is significantly less than if you take out the cervix. So I present those. Now, if a patient has a significant history of abnormal pap smears, or there is a thickened lining of the uterus I'm worried about, I'm absolutely going to present them with the option of a total laparoscopic or robotic assisted hysterectomy in conjunction with a mesh augmented repair. But I do tell them, if we keep the cervix, published data shows that the mesh exposure is 0.3% with a sacrocolpopexy. If you take out the cervix, that can go upward to 3.6 to 3.7%. So although 3.6 and 3.7 is low, it's a tenfold difference, right? So we present that data and that information to the patient and let them make their decision in regards to preserving the cervix or taking out the cervix. But I think all of those technique options do decrease our risk of mesh exposure, and it's a significantly different plane that we're usually in than transvaginal mesh. So I explain that all to a patient so that their understanding of why this is really different in terms of the mesh exposure rate, really different in terms of the complication rates than the transvaginal mesh kits.